until the slide goes up.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, Margaret's here. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Morning. Why don't we all wave to George?
George.
He's carrying it all today. He's the thought leader. Hello, everyone.
Morning, Tracy.
Morning.
Okay, well, we can get started if you'd like. We've let everybody in that was in the waiting room. Let me share my screen real quick.
And hi, this is Bill Shepard. I'm the founder and CEO of the COO Forum, and welcome to COO Transitions and our COO Executives in Transition efforts. And great to have everybody here. The COO Executive in Transition is designed to support Chief Operating Officers in their uncertain and challenging business times, getting COOs in transition on your way to the next great opportunity. Open to COO Forum members, as well as any Chief Operating Officer or Second Command Executive, pro bono, with absolutely no fees or obligations. This initiative aligns with the Chief Operating Officer Business Forum, Inc., COO Forum core values, and is expressly intended for all Chief Operating Officers and Second in Command Executives. We are on our third month, and we'll be continuing with this weekly program. We are also looking to add some new initiatives in the 2021 new year. In terms of guidelines, just real quick, meeting courtesy, the muting of your speaker during the presentation as well as during the time others are speaking is very, very helpful. Business first, we are informal. If you have to go to take care of business or something family or whatever, just take off, come back. It's that we are informal. We're not formal at all. Business language and no politics. We use that because it just works better. Meeting recorded. We are recording this and we put it on the Mighty Network, and it becomes a reference for others who have missed the call, and also it'll give you a chance to from time to time to go into the Mighty Networks to review one of the other ones that you remember from way back when, and so forth. Keep your job prospects confidential. You know, the worst thing that can happen in these kind of situations is somebody poaches and tries to take your company that you're working towards, and we don't want to do that. Please post questions during the session on your chat, because we will have a Q&A, and that also gives us kind of a head start and runway on that. I would like to introduce to you the people that are, first off, I'd like to talk about the COO Forum. Laura Weichel is COO Forum Second in Command for 13 years and is our Executive Vice President. Based in Atlanta, she is responsible for leading the many and various activities for the Chief Operating Officer Business Forum, COO Forum organization, and leadership overseeing all chapters, chapter directors, and members. She is a wonderful, upbeat, and visionary colleague who creates extraordinary outcomes and successes. We're also joined by Fiona Murray, who's heads of member services. She's new to our organization, and she's taken the point on COO Executives in Transition. I'm sure many of you have touched base with her at one time or another, and she's outstanding, and we are so delighted she's part of the COO Forum team. Welcome, George Murray. George Murray is an Army veteran and 25 years of global operations working in 4 industries: automotive, contract electronic manufacturing, industrial automation, and capital equipment manufacturing. George is the author of Hired: Cut Your Career Search Time in Half, available on Amazon and Kindle. He found himself in 2 career transitions in less than 3 years and developed a simply but not easily process to land your next job faster. Thank you, George, for your military service to our country. And with that, George, take it away.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the time. Thank you both, Laura and Bill. I'm going to share my screen here. How's everybody doing today?
Good.
All right. I'm just going to ask the 2020 question. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Got it.
So just a little bit, 4 gears to why 4 gears? I think it's the meat of the book. If you asked me 5 years ago, the type of book that I would write, if I was going to write a book, it wouldn't have been about career transition. It probably would have been going into a business and turning the business in, 9 months or less. But found myself in 2 career transitions, as Bill outlined, in a relatively short period of time. And like most the first time, I was definitely lost. It reminded me a lot like when I first learned how to drive standard the first time. Took a heck of a lot of effort, grind the gears to get it in the first gear, and basically it never really got off to the smooth start. The other thing is I reference is the fact that I'm a muscle car fanatic. My favorite car is a 69 Trans Am. Hope that's not political. It was the first year it came out. It had a 455 Super Duty engine, and loved the car. So that's the reference to why 4 gears of career transition. So I'm not sure, I can't see, but how many people do we actually have in the audience?
Looks like about 23 altogether.
There you go.
About 23. So I'm going to ask Laura to pick a number between 1 and 75. And then if we can just go around the room and somebody pull up whatever number they are, what I'm asking is that you come close to the number without going over. So Laura's going to write down her number so she can turn around and present to us after all the numbers are given. But what we'll do is I'll actually raffle off a book. And all you got to do is whoever comes closest without going over, just send us your address and I'll get the book out to you.
Are we putting it in the chat, George?
All right.
Or how are we getting the numbers?
Yeah, they can just go through the chat. And then hopefully we can turn around and get everybody relatively quickly, 3 or 4 minutes, and then you can identify who the winner is.
Okay, I'm looking. What if there's a tie?
I'll give 2.
Okay. Let me know when everybody's finished. Give you 5 seconds. And I'm going to type in what my response was. You ready? Okay, no more. We're not taking any more.
So what was your number?
32. I just typed it in.
All right.
So we've got, looks like we have a 34 and a 30.
So 31, 34 went over.
Oh, gotcha. Okay, that's how you do it. Yeah, so
Yep.
and it looks like Andrea.
Closest to the number without going over. Who is it?
Okay, Andrea.
Okay, well, congratulations. Just send us, send me, or you can send Laura and she can send me your address and I'll get the book out either today or tomorrow.
Awesome. Thank you, George.
Yeah. So for those who are interested in the book, actually, I'm actually being thankful this week for many things, but Kirkhouse Publishing actually helped publish the book. They took a chance on me. And so if you want to, all this week, you can actually get a discount actually on the physical book. Just use that discount number, hired, 20% off, and you get 20% off the book. So I'm not going to go over this because Bill did such a great job introducing me, so I really appreciate that. So first gear, as I talked about, and oh, by the way, I think we got 75 slides or whatever, so hopefully we had enough time. Just joking. So first gear, as I said, is really a lot like driving stick the first time, at least for me. I had an uncle actually train me and drove me all the way up at the top of the hill, put it in park, emergency brake, and said, get in, this is your first, you got to pop the clutch. And believe me, we went backwards and it wasn't pretty. So I think that's a lot like career transition the first time. There's a couple of things in life that they don't teach you in school. They certainly don't teach you how to balance a checkbook, do an interview, do your resume, and they certainly don't prepare you for your first career transition. So one of the things I tell people is that when you're in your first career transition, after about a couple of months, I actually looked in the mirror and I said, you know, what are the things that I need to be able to communicate? I think this is a part of the process from the time that you leave to the time that you land your next opportunity. You got to be able to process whatever happened to you. The good thing, I would say not so good thing, is that a lot of people can blame COVID. Prior to that, you actually had to come up with some kind of meaningful reason as to why you left your last organization and remaining much positive. And that's really where I tripped up the first time, because I had not processed what just happened. So I really carried that through in my initial networking meetings. And I think that really actually had a negative impact on my progress the first couple of months. So I tell people it's really a good timeout for you to really understand, what have you done? What do you want to do? And how are you going to be able to communicate that in a short period of time? One of the things that I was able to be successful in doing was to just take an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper. I did this on a Saturday, about 3 hours. And I wrote, on a landscape, 3 equal lines. And way over to the left, I identified, the last job that I had. And I always remained and kept positive. What are the things that I liked about the job? Whether it was a title, it was the commute, the culture, the pay. I always try to tell people, try to be as specific as possible and as positive as possible. And then what you want to do is leave the middle for a minute, jump over. And I always, I've always been a workaholic, so to speak. And I'm sure a lot of COOs kind of fall in that category. We're just driven that way. But I said, if I won the lottery tomorrow, but I was still going to work, what would be the job? Now, I found that the path that I was on for 25 plus years, I'm going to be a COO before I'm 50, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I kind of changed and I said, you know what? That's not really what I wanted to do moving forward. What I liked about was I like to be in the factories. I like to run operations on the tactical side, be able to be influencing the strategic, but really, coaching, mentoring, and everything else. And I really was laying that out. So that gave me kind of a good observation that said, hey, you know what? If I won the lottery, this is the ideal job. Then what I did was I come back to the center and I said, listen, I'm going to take a little bit of the last job, all the positives, and a lot of the job that I potentially would win, or do if I won the lottery, and I would put it together, and that would be my ideal position. And so when you're going out to talk to people, human nature is people want to help. The problem and challenges I see, including myself in my first career transition, was I wasn't able to articulate what I wanted. And that can be a hindrance to you if you don't go through this process. And again, you need to really clarify your story. When you get prepared prior to, networking, interviewing, there's 2 questions that are going to be asked, and we'll talk a little bit about those later, but it's the questions you have to answer is, tell me about yourself and how can I help? And the how can I help is critical, is being that specific. Here I'm looking for this ideal position or this particular industry, this particular company, but then also have that, I'm also looking to network with these types of folks. And these types of folks are always people that potentially could hire you. So when, you pitch that, hey, I'm looking for a COO position with a company between 50 and 200 million in manufacturing technology, and they say, I don't know anybody like that. The next shift would be is that you want to say, hey, but I'm also looking to network with CEOs and board members or private equity firms or bankers and small business owners. Then you always walk away in your networking meetings, with 3 or 4 connections more. And that's really what you're trying to do. You're trying to develop your pipeline, but you need to understand what your story is. And I always tell people you need to prepare for transition, because myself, I was in a pretty good economy. The unemployment rate about then was about 4.1%, and it was dropping. And I thought, hey, you know what? I'm going to be able to find a job pretty quick. Well, that pretty quick was 13 months. It took me 13 months sitting with 416 people, averaging 3 a day networking, to land my next role. So I just tell people, you want to prepare, and if you think it's going to 6 months, you might want to double it just to prepare yourself. And always make sure that you sit down and do the finance review. I think that the first career transition, I was a little bit optimistic, a little bit more than most, and I didn't really adjust, my spending. There's certain things that I did in career transition my first time that probably some people wouldn't have never even thought of. I renegotiated every bill that I had. Like, when's the last time you actually renegotiated your cable bill? Last time I did that, 4 years ago, I was able to save $75 per month, and I got a lot more channels, right? But those are the types of things that I always tell people is that you're the CEO of yourself, incorporated. And if you aren't evaluating those on a regular basis, just like a business is, there's an opportunity for you to cut your costs. The other thing I did was in my first career transition, I worked at Amazon on third shift. The first time I worked third shift in probably about 10 years. I worked the 12-hour shift Thursday, Friday, and Saturday evenings. And at that time, I was running about 5 to 7 miles a day and maybe 20,000 steps. But in a 12-hour period, I was doing 25,000 steps. And I was just on the the production line, the distribution line. And I could really understand why Amazon was successful and they were beating their competition. But I tell people nothing's below you, especially when you're in career transition. And if you can find a way to really stop the bleeding, or at least slow down the bleeding about the money going out versus the money coming in, there's always an opportunity. As a matter of fact, I met a gentleman who's a PhD, and he was working for UPS delivering packages for over a year. So you just don't know the people that you come in contact, their stories, their backgrounds, and their hustles, right? But I always tell people, make sure that you find a way not only to control your finances, but also maybe try to shorten the bleed off, because a lot of money goes out when you're in career transition. Very little comes in if you're not looking at opportunities, whether you're doing side consulting, etc. And then the last thing before you shift out of gears and get into second shift is I tell people, make sure that you scrub your social media. I can't tell you how many executives that I have found that because they have open networks to their Facebook pages or their LinkedIn, and depending on how you post or what you post, could influence your final rounds. And it has. I've actually met 2 CEOs who went through final rounds and their board found something on their Facebook page that they posted over a year ago. That's how diligent they are. So it's making sure that, A, you're posting things, I would say, as positive and upbeat. And if your grandmother would approve and reading it in the front page, then you're probably okay. So any questions on first gear? This is the tough gear because a lot of times people try to either gloss over it or don't go through these particular processes, and it actually hinders their progress in the next gears. All right, second gear. How many people have heard about branding? Do you know your branding? So I had not heard about branding other than, branding, marketing, product or services for companies. And so it was very new to me. It's like, George, you got to create your brand and everything else. So I'm from the Minnesota area. There's 2 people that I always highly regard and talk about that really transformed my brand because, again, the second person I networked with told me, he said, you know what, George, I'm going to tell you a little bit of tough love that no one knows because you're a head downs kind of guy in the business. You've been doing no networking. Very few people know you. He says, so you're in the marathon. The marathon started about an hour and a half ago and you've got to catch up. That was the analogy. So he said, you need to brand yourself and you need to catch up with your competition because they're out there, they're networking, they're in front of the hiring managers on a daily basis. So the 2 people that transformed my brand and the traffic into my LinkedIn were Kathleen Crandall, Kathleen with a K, Crandall with a C. She was able to pull out what makes me unique and different. And then Ann Pryor, the LinkedIn expert, basically took all that right wording and plugged it into my LinkedIn. And so here's the difference. Prior to them actually taking an evaluation of my LinkedIn profile and my brand, I was probably having 70 to 80 people look at my LinkedIn profile every 90 days. In the last 4 years, it hasn't gone below 1,500. Every 90 days, 1,500 people are looking at my LinkedIn profile. So they educated me. They told me as far as when to post, how to post, what to post. You want to just make sure that you're always being your unique self, and you're posting things that are of value of potential people out in social media land, and it resonates with your skill set and your background. Love this dude. I always tell people you always need to show up prepared. So one of the things that I tell people is before you even get into networking, and a lot of people make this mistake, is that they don't do the homework on the people the night before. There is something that is more expensive than money, and that is time. And if somebody is going to give you 20, 30 minutes, it's really critically important that you take the time to really do some research on them. So my process was always, and I've got at least 40 of these books in my 2 career transitions. So the night before, if I had 3 network meetings the next day, I would always say, here's their name on the top left hand. And on the top right hand corner, I would say how many connections that we have in common. I'd identify maybe 2 or 3 of those people that I know really well, because that's going to help my discussion when I sit down and network with them. Because again, an introduction may get you the meeting, but you've got to find a way to truly connect in that first networking meeting. What you're trying to do in that networking meeting is create what I call cheerleaders out in the workforce. So that if you're a COO or if you're a marketing person, the first time they hear an opportunity, the next response is that, hey, you know what? I just met George a couple of weeks ago. He's looking, he's a great candidate. You should talk to him, right? So always be prepared. And maybe what you want to do is also look at their LinkedIn, and maybe there's a job or a company that they used to work at that may have been a supplier. But what you're trying to do is develop a relationship in a quick amount of time in that first networking meeting. And then I always tell people is that in that networking meeting should be split up in a 70-30 split. 70% of the time, let them speak. You are trying to really understand who they are. And I guarantee you that in a society where our average attention span is 5 seconds, there's a recent article just about 2 months ago. Do you know the goldfish actually has 6 seconds? So we have less the attention span than a goldfish. It's like squirrel. But it's really important for you to do that because, again, that's going to make you unique and different. You're listening to them, you're taking notes, you're basically showing general interest in them. And that's what people want. They want to have people that are truly interested in them. And then the 30% is split up into those 2 questions I asked before. Be prepared to answer, tell me about yourself, and then what are you looking for? How can I help? Always be prepared. Again, how many people actually use an elevator pitch? And I'm cringing when I say elevator pitch. I say elevator pitches are so 2016. They're all about you. You're forcing me, the listener, to try to figure out how does that resonate with maybe an opportunity or a person that may be looking for your services, as opposed to being that little guy up in the right-hand corner, being prepared and creating 1 or 2 value propositions based upon their background that you've done the homework on, as well as maybe the first few minutes. How are you going to say, how can I, tell me about yourself? So what I consider a value proposition statement is what makes you unique and different, and how can you say it in 30 seconds or less? So I'll give you 2 examples. If I'm networking with professionals or people that are my peers, they'll say, George, can you tell me a little bit about yourself? And my response is I'm an executive that takes flat to declining companies and I turn them around on the top and the bottom line while injecting a more equally accountable work culture. Do you know anybody that needs somebody like that? That's 24 seconds. That's top, bottom line, and culture. And I can tell you, in interviewing with companies in the last 10 years, that's their 3 problems. Then they turn around and say, you know what? I do know somebody that's struggling with their top line. Tell me more. You've zeroed right in, and that's what you want to do. My other value proposition statement that I used, and I actually got hired here for this role and my previous role, was a little bit more visual. It was strictly to a CEO, and I do this mostly to CEOs and board members, and I bring in my military background as the leadership. And I tell them, when they say, George, tell me about yourself, I say, I'm a rappel master. Much like my military career, I drop into difficult situations, I assess the group, develop a collaborative strategy, and execute the plan. Now, the plan may be the company's overall vision, or it may be the yearly P&L, but my team always exceeds the bar. Do you know anybody that needs a rappel master? You create a visual, You tie in something that's unique about yourself and it resonates. I can't tell you how many times I've gone into coffee shops after that where the people don't necessarily remember my name, but they remember, hey, you're the rappel master, right? Again, you want to find and you want to develop a value proposition that's meaningful, that's actionable, and that actually resonates with something that they may be looking for. And then you want to be able to drive LinkedIn traffic. So once you've developed your brand, once you've prepared, once you've developed your value proposition, you want to make sure that you're posting at least, I would say, once or twice a week, or excuse me, a day. And the reason why I say that is because that not only will your network see value, whether it's an article from Wall Street Journal based on the new trends, the new trends in chief operating officer or new metrics, et cetera, but it also resonates when they comment or they like that their social media group sees that, and that drives traffic to your LinkedIn profile. People always ask me, they're like, George, you're always on LinkedIn. I said, no, I'm not, although I may look like it. But what happens, it's part of my structured day in the life, we'll talk about that a little bit later, is that I go home every night at 6 o'clock to 6:30, and it's programmed. I will pull articles, memes, whatever, and I will load it into an app that's on my phone, or you can do it through your computer, and it's called Buffer, Buffer, buffer.com or Buffer on the app. And what Buffer does is it takes all your social media sites, you can link them all together, and then you can identify memes, posts, news articles, and then you can make comments, and then you can identify the particular times in the day that you want it to be posted. So for example, it's 10:27 here, Central Standard Time. I could have actually something post at 10:31 while I'm speaking to you, right? But again, this is all about time management, and I only do it 30 minutes every day, and I get posted, and it posts to my Twitter account twice a day, my Facebook page once a day, and my LinkedIn profile everywhere three to four times a day. So drive traffic to your LinkedIn profile will prompt numbers and traffic to your LinkedIn. And then finally, I'm going to tell you, if you haven't realized by now, career transition is about you. It's the toughest job that you probably have had in the last 10 years, because guess what? You're the CEO of You Incorporated. You transitioned out of a role. You don't have any structure. You've got to create that structure. You are the CEO, you're the chief marketing officer, you're the chief sales officer, you are et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All the way down at the end of the day, you are the janitor of You Incorporated. So be prepared. It's a lot of work, but don't despair. Questions on gear 2? We still got everybody? No one's sleeping behind the, all right. So gear 3, first thing I tell people is, as I just announced, career transition, you don't know if you're gonna land in the next month or the next 13 months, like I did the first time. One of the things I chose is that, hey, there's a lot of things I can't control. I can't control that. I can't control that they picked the guy that showed up in the blue tie today, or excuse me, the red tie versus the guy who showed up in the blue tie today. But you can control your attitude, your network, gratitude, all those things. So my process was really, I looked in the mirror after 3 months, I think it was, totally frustrated. And I said, you know what? Who's going to hire an ugly, overweight guy? I was 6'3", heaviest I'd ever been. And I said, you know what? I'm going to start a workout program. Yep. Did I get off the couch and start running? No, I would have certainly had a heart attack. But I started walking, awkwardly jogging, and in about 4 or 5 months, I got up to about 5 miles and I dropped 40 pounds. And so that not only helped with my overall health, but also helped with my confidence because I felt better. I looked better. At least I thought I looked better. But I always tell people, control what you can. If you have that positive attitude, those are the people, they're going to resonate with you. They're going to want to be a part of you. They want you to be a part of their team. Those are the things that you can control. Always show up, I would say, energy, enthusiasm, and a positive attitude. And I guarantee you that each and every day as time goes on through career transition, even though each day may seem like a month, that when you look back, 3 months go by really quick. But always show up with energy, enthusiasm, a positive attitude. And if you wake up that morning and you're just not feeling it, just like work, call in, just tell people, give them a heads up and say, listen, you know what? I'm just feeling a little bit under the weather. Can we reschedule our network event, our Zoom call, what have you? But, do that, because what you don't want to do is show up 50% and really not come off that way. And then you're probably not going to get the best introductions and the best identified connections to move your progress forward. I tell people, always show up like you're ready to interview or ready to take the job the first day. Hence my tie and my shirt. Always the night before, I was always watching my dimes and nickels. So I would get, night before I would be ironing the shirt, iron my tie and everything else. And I made sure that I was going out when we could go out, showing up, in my best. Because a lot of times those opportunities may be an introduction to your future boss. You just don't know. So you want to make sure that you show up. And I tell people in your Zoom calls, please make sure that you are aesthetic or receiving aesthetically. So a lot of times I've networked with people and they've had certain things that could give off in a negative way. Like, for example, somebody I networked with, they had curtains that I think my mother had still, right? And that just ages you. So I just tell people, try to find a very clear background in the corner of the home or the office, wherever you're working, when you're having these meetings. Make sure that you show up the best that you possibly can. Always make sure that the camera is at least eye level or slightly up, not kind of down, looking down on there. These are all things that are going to make you show up in your best self. And then I tell people, create the day in the life. So what I mean by that is everybody left a structured life in their last role. They got up at a certain time, they did certain things, they went to work, they had KPIs, they had certain meetings, all that's gone. All that structure is gone. And I found this out, and after 2 or 3 months, that a couple of days went by and it's like, wow, I didn't get really much accomplished. I didn't have anything structured. So I started every morning. My process, full disclosure, was I got up. I always identified what I was grateful for. Always positive. Still had the roof over my head. Still, was able to get fed. Thank the Lord for, my home, my kids, my wife, everything else. Then I did what I had through networking. I was talked into morning affirmations and meditation. And here I am, a very highly skeptical New England Army guy. I said, I don't think that this is really going to work for me. And the person that I talked to, who was actually on my personal board of advisors, we'll talk about a little bit later, said, write out, George, shut up, do it for 30 days, and then come back and tell me if it actually works. And ironically enough, I've been doing it for 3 years. So I get up, I meditate 10 minutes, go on YouTube, because YouTube was a great mentor coach for me, because you can search so much stuff, it can walk you through the process. So for 10 minutes, I would meditate for energy, maybe a positive attitude. That's what I would search. Those processes walk you through that. What I said was meditation cleared out all the junk in my head, because we can be our worst career coaches, especially through career transition. We're always second guess ourselves. Am I too old? Do I still have it? All that stuff. You need to clean that stuff out. And then the morning affirmations on YouTube, I just said morning affirmations about, kicking into high gear. And then they would, boom, those would come. And then you just walk through them. Yeah. And ironically enough, that changed my whole perspective, and it was able to set me up for the rest of the day. And then I would go out and run, and then I would network. That was my day. And at the end of the day, like I stated, Buffer app, put all the stuff that I was going to network with, followed up with a job alerts that came to me, and I just submitted. And by the way, I only spent 20 minutes every day submitting jobs, because less than 1% of the opportunities that you're going to land are through submitting a job. Then I also tell people is make sure that you're, in this process, you have meaningful connections. I can't tell you how many people will reach out to me and they'll hit connect. And that's a lost opportunity, because you're less than 50% going to be connected to the individual if you don't put a personal introduction. Now, granted, you only have about 300 characters to make a first impression. So make sure that you spend some time in creating templates, not only introducing yourself, but responding within 36 hours after they've accepted your connection to say, I really appreciate your time and connecting, and maybe setting up a time to talk or whatever, right? Because what you're trying to do, as I tell people, you're trying to create as many cheerleaders out in the workforce for you. This is a proper process. And that's one of the examples I use. It's short, it's sweet, but it basically tells them who I am, my skill set, my background, and what I drive to. And I can tell you that 95% of the people that I reach out cold introductions accept my introduction. So just make sure that you have a meaningful introduction. Don't just hit connect, because you're less than 50% that the person will actually accept. And every day, every week I had kind of a mantra of, my way to reach out to people, certain industries and everything. We'll talk a little bit about that later. Questions on gear 3? Hey, Laura, how are we doing with time?
You're fine.
Okay, good.
So time's all yours, George.
All right. So how many people remember the double clutch? So back before they had this auto synchronization and everything else, and they did away with standards, a lot of times what happened was either the engine outpaced the tires or the tires outpaced the engine, and you had to double clutch in order to sync those back into place. It's kind of like career transition. You build up momentum, you come up over a hill, maybe you're interviewing right now, you're in final interviewing phases, and you slow down your networking. Never slow down, never slow down. Only slow down after a week after you've accepted the role in your next opportunity. But I always tell people you have to double clutch to keep that momentum. Don't slow down. So a couple of things that I did every 3 to 4 weeks on my calendar. Oh, by the way, Google Calendar was always linked to my phone, and my notifications, my meetings, etc. My calendar was more packed in career transition than it ever was in any other job that I ever had. Notifications, reminders, etc. But every 3 to 4 weeks on a Saturday between 7:35 and 8:15, I have a stop, start, continue model. I would evaluate my progress the last 3 or 4 weeks, and I'd say, what am I gonna continue to do, because it's working, it's bearing fruit, it's creating, the right network connections, it's developing the right pipeline. Maybe some of the things I'm going to stop doing because it's really not adding any value. But then I would also let the last 15 minutes and brainstorm. What can I do this week differently? So for example, I cold called CEOs on a dare. Somebody had dared me. They said, George, why don't you just cold call CEOs? I'm like, I'm not a sales guy. He said, well, first of all, you're in career transition, so you are a sales guy. You're selling yourself. So get over that. And then second of all, make sure that your message is unique and it's clear and crisp. Because again, CEOs have very little time and they don't want to hear somebody blabbering on. So I said, okay. I spent some time creating a pitch, and I identified 10 CEOs in the Minneapolis area. We're not talking about, George's Cable House CEO. We're talking about Ecolab CEO, Graco CEO, the CEO of St. Gobain down in Faribault, Minnesota. We're also talking about CEOs at other large companies. And so I reached out and I said, okay, after hours, I called them. I left a message on their voicemail and I said, this is George Murray. I'm a recently transitioning executive where I took a company from 100 to 180 million in 18 months. I'm looking to network in the medium to large business community. I would love your advice. Click, 24 seconds. The first person to respond was Doug Baker of Ecolab. I was floored. In 2016, his total comp was 34 million and he's running $1 billion company, and he calls me 2 days later. First of all, you got to be prepared for that because I wasn't prepared. The call was something like, hey, George, this is Doug. And I said, hey, Doug, the only Doug I know is down in Florida. And it didn't sound like him. He says, well, you called me. And I said, I did. He goes, CEO of Ecolab. I think I dropped the phone. He goes, I apologize for taking a couple of days, but I've been traveling. And I was like, wow. And I said, I regurgitated my last sentence. I left him. And he goes, George, I get it. He goes, first of all, incredible message. He goes, I don't think I've ever had an ops guy actually call me and sell me himself. He says, and kudos. He goes, that message was really crisp. He goes, what, less than 30 seconds? He says, 24. And he said, here's my email. You've already got my phone, and you got my cell phone number. If I can do anything for you, by all means, reach out. So again, stop, start, and continue. you always have to find ways to be top of mind. So when you network with somebody, you need to make sure that you set a cadence up in your calendars to reach out to them every couple of weeks, so that you're keeping that network, you're keeping those cheerleaders active. Hey, I'm still out there. So one of the things that I did was every 5 to 7 weeks, I would send an update. I'd blind copy everybody that I have connected with or are connected on LinkedIn. So it's a lot of people. And if you're in Google Gmail, you're only allowed to do 500 at a time. So you've got to basically place them on several emails. But it's basically 3 or 4 lines. Hey, here's my either first update. This is what I've been doing. I networked with so many people, blah, blah, blah. And then the next 3 or 4 lines, what am I looking for? So I'm looking for a manufacturing technology company, 50 to 500 million as an executive in a president or a chief operating officer role, ideally. And also looking to network with X and Y and B type of folks. Boom. And I always got about 80% response. By the way, make sure that you blind copy, because there's always at least 3 or 4 people that like to respond, reply all. Don't know why, but they do. And no one wants to be on a distribution list. But boy, I can tell you that is really, these basic things I found were just so incredible to keep you out there on top of everybody's mind every 5 to 7 weeks. And when you land, and you will, you should do that at least twice a year. So the next time I see John Beecham, it's not 2 years ago when he was in career transition. All right. The other thing too is I always tell people, try something new. And that was me in air assault school. And I tell people that this is the time that you probably need to go away from what your parents told you or your grandparents told you all your life. Act your age. Don't act your age, because if you act your age, you're going to come across like you're going to retire in the next year or two. Especially me being 53 years old, I guarantee you that a lot of people will make some assumption that says, oh, you know what, does he still have it, blah, blah, blah. I always tell people, try something new, whether it's cold call people, whether it's send a letter to people. As a matter of fact, in Minnesota, the Star Tribune has a business section that articulates the movers and the shakers every Monday. Bunch of people's names, they tell them what the companies they went to, and I would literally for 10, or excuse me, the 10, 10, and 10 process. If anybody's interested, it's on my LinkedIn profile, one of the articles. And I basically, my metric was to send out 10 letters or emails a day, 10 meetings a day, and 10 calls a day. And I did that for 10 weeks. So over 500 people I sent letters out to, and I congratulated them and saying, hey, you know what? You know, it's a great company. Maybe one line that really resonates with them if they're a CFO. Maybe I said something about the 10K that said, hey, here, maybe you want to take a look at this. This is what I found out. That may be an opportunity for you. And then 3 or 4 lines that said, hey, here's who I'm looking for, my value proposition. I mailed those every day, or excuse me, I represented 10 a day. So Monday through Friday. So 50 letters I dumped in the mail on Sunday night for 10 weeks. And out of 500 people, I met over 400 of those people face to face. I was truly floored that old school mail still works, but I guarantee you, I was one of the few people that do that, and it really works because people are like, hey, I'm getting bills in, spam. Does anybody ever write a letter anymore? So again, you're making yourself unique and different. Try something new. Questions on gear 3? Because we're almost home. All right. No questions, all right. Gear 4, in this whole process, it's important for you to create a personal board of advisors. These are 3 to 5 people, and please don't get all 3 or 5 people in chief operating officer roles, because they'll all say, yep, you're doing the great thing, you're doing the right thing. Make sure they're cross-functional, they're a CEO, they're a CFO, they're a marketing person, etc. But they're people that you have come close to and that also can hold you accountable. Be an ear to listen, because again, your spouse is just as much stressful as you are, if not more. My wife was just like, what is all this coffee meetings all about? What's this networking? You need to be submitting for jobs. But these are people that are going to turn around and hold you accountable, but they're also people that can also help introduce you when your pipeline starts to dry up. So everybody who's in Minnesota knows LinkedIn Pryor, LinkedIn profile expert. she was gracious enough to really help me, not only in my LinkedIn, but just how to approach all overall networking and getting out there. Lisa Fraga, who's the friend, she's literally, I would say, the sister that passed away when I was 6 years old. She told it like it is. She was the one that actually told me, shut up, George, do the yoga, or excuse me, do the meditation and the morning affirmations for a month, and then tell me it doesn't work. And I've been doing it for 4 years. Alan McClellan is one of those CEOs I reached out to and I cold called. He is the CEO of St. Cobain Sage Glass down in Faribault. And I have literally had a relationship, conversation with him every month for the last 3 or 4 years. And he actually wrote the advanced praise in my book. Great guy. Jenny Jeffords, she, what I would call an energy coach. You need somebody like this that if you get the thanks but no thanks letter on a Friday, you can call this person and they can get you motivated in the 5 or 10 minutes, pull you out of that pit that you are in. And then Ryan Carlson's at BMO. He was my financial advisor. He kept making sure that I had enough money to keep everything in the lights on. But personal board of advisors are incredibly important. And everybody who knows Bill George, who's I think he actually wrote the book True North, and he talks about having a personal board of advisors. He has a personal board advisor over 30 years that have talked him into the right decisions, whether it been personal or professional. Uber networkers. So these are people like Bill Shepard and Laura Wilkie. These people know everybody. These are the people that you want to be able to be connected to and are willing to help you every couple of weeks with your other connections to keep you progressing. So these are the people, don't be afraid to reach out to probably more frequently than the people that you maybe just networked with once or twice. And then I tell people is that you have to create a wow at every stage of the interviewing process. I'm not going to go into great detail because this is in my book. It's also on my LinkedIn profile, three sessions on 3 stages of creating the wow. First, you need to make sure that on a phone screen that you show up ready. How many people actually show up dressed in a suit on the phone with a phone screen? Show of hands. I only see 3 or 4 people. So Laura, you're going to have to just tell me, is there anybody raising their hand? No. Oh, a missed opportunity. So here's my analysis. When I was in the military, I put on my dress greens or my dress blues. I always stood about 1.5 inches taller and I always talked with more confidence. It will come across to you on a phone screen doing that. Just that particular action will help you in the next step. And the next step is getting the face-to-face or the first video call now that we're in virtual land right now with COVID and everything else, but you want to get in advance. You got to do things that other people aren't doing. The second one is really developing a value proposition around the opportunity. So it comes out of the first question or the first meeting on the phone screen. I always ask, what is critical for this particular person's success in the first 6 months to a year? I identify the 3 or 5 things that they talk about. And the value proposition is basically examples, situations, and actions that really resonate. And I hand it to the hiring manager and the HR manager after my first face-to-face or my first video conference. And it's just a reinforcement of our ongoing discussions. It tells them that I'm listening, and it also tells them how I've been able and give them examples of how I've been able to been there, done that, and fixed it. I always tell people when you're going through the interviewing process, there's 2 stacks that they're reviewing. There's the stack that's evident, the resumes, and they go down over time as you advance through your interviewing process. But there's also the virtual one that very few people add. It's the value added stack. It's the value proposition, and then in your final round, creating a 90-day plan based upon all the discussions you've had with everybody. Here's your approach to your first 90 days. And I can tell you that resonated and basically beat out the competition of the people that I was interviewing with, and how I got my job here at Onto and my previous job with Worth Adams. I'd never been in those industries before, but was because of the fact that I was able to follow these processes, and the CEOs and presidents said it was because you basically listened and you already had a plan laid out. You already thought about how are you going to come in the first 90 days based upon our discussions. And I always tell them, this is tentative. After our first week, we can align and tweak this, but this is just my thoughts. And I can tell you that in my last 2 positions, I've tweaked it less than 10% with the CEO or the president. So always create a wow. I tell people at the end, and you all will get there, you all cross the finish line, just make sure that you pay it forward, because career transition is tough for everybody. Some people are lucky, just like businesses, they hit it the first time and they get it in the first week or the first month. Others, like me, the first time, it takes you 13 months. And so that's the outline of roadmap right there in 1 page. Pretty simple, right? To do it tomorrow.
Very good. George, we have some questions that came through. Maybe we can get on those. We've got plenty of time, hopefully.
Sure.
Josh, why don't you ask your question about the board members, and George can take that on.
Oh, great. Thank you for the content today, George. It's really good stuff. I had a question about the personal board. I'm curious, in your opinion, do the board members know that they're a member of your board?
Yes.
And I'm curious, how do you start that process? Is it just something that kind of happens organically through your networking?
I think it's, it's a process in which you feel comfortable with people. I mean, you've got to have, it's just like the team that you're creating in your own business, right? You're creating a personal board of you incorporated, right? So you want people that are not always going to say yes. At least for me, I want people that are going to say no, like Lisa just said, shut up, George, and do it, right? But they do know, and each person, I'm not meeting with them, every day or every week. Certain people like Alan, I only met with, I'd call or talk to once a month. Lisa, I talk to almost every day. Jenny, I talk to almost every day or every other day. Ann Pryor was probably weekly. And then Ryan was at least every 2 or 3 weeks. So you develop that cadence for certain people depending on what you need. I mean, Jenny, I almost needed almost every day because I needed energy to promote me and make sure that I came off in my best self, especially when, I'd met with somebody who actually got 4 no's in less than 36 hours. I've gotten 2 no's, and I remember how I felt. And they went through that process. So you need people that are going to surround you and say, you know what, move on, don't despair. You're better than that. This wasn't your opportunity, but you need those people.
Thank you.
Very good. Chris O'Rourke, why don't you share yours with George, and he can address your question.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for your time today, George. I've been enjoying your book. Also great to meet a fellow runner. I'm a marathon runner, so I think that running definitely helps in the job transition. So my question is in regards to in-network meetings, would you recommend or advise that you share any sort of marketing collateral or any materials like a presentation or anything? Or do you think it's better just to have face-to-face direct conversation?
In the book too, I share, one of the things that I did differently was I did a network card. So everybody comes with the 1-pager, right? So I always looked at ways, how do I decipher myself? So I took that 1 page and I folded it in half like this and I put it on cardstock. And it was all about the things that I could do. I put my ugly mug on LinkedIn, right, my face there so that they could see it. But I put it on cardstock, and then on the back was really a little brief background, my skill sets, my 3 major accomplishments. The reason I did that was that if you notice, a lot of times when you do meet and bring that, people will fold that and put it in the book, and guess what? Either it goes in the book, never to be seen again, or it falls on the floor, never to be seen again, right? So I just thought that, to your point, I always pulled it out. I never started off with that because a lot of people tend to do that. And it's like, okay, well, obviously you don't care about me. The first 10 minutes, 15 minutes is always, tell me about yourself. Tell me about your current situation. You've been with the company for 3 years. What do you like about it? What's the culture like? You're asking, open-ended questions that don't just say yes, no. It's like, yeah, well, I took this job because of this, but I really enjoyed this. And you take notes and you always follow up. Thank you for your time, and try to find something that you resonated with. So for example, there's a gentleman that I was networking with, Dan Halverson, a master network here in the Minneapolis area. He and I, the first 20 minutes, talked about how his daughters went through they both went through scholarships on swim. And my daughter was in high school, just starting swim. She started late. And we talked about that. And since then, that's how we connected. And over the last 4 years, I can't tell you, there's at least 6 or 7 dozen people we've introduced either back and forth. That's what you're trying to do, is create that connection. And our connection is our daughters. Boom. That's how we talk. That's how we start our conversations. How's your daughter's doing? Right? So again, yeah, I'd say you have it. Have it in the backup. It's not something that you lead with.
Okay. Thank you.
Very good. Brian, why don't you share your question with George?
Sure. Hi, George. Thanks for your content today. Great stuff. When you talked about the 90-day plan, I'm interested in this and just wondered if you used a template or an outline, or you wrote it from scratch, or you used to communicate that as your
3 templates I developed because of my approach. Either it's operational or it's more sales business growth driven. But it touches on the directs and the indirects that I would be a part of the team or the groups on. So it goes on and it identifies what I would do in the 30 days, what I would do in the 60 days, in the 90 days. And it's in the book too. There's a template, but if you want to talk a little bit more, you can just reach out to me directly. We can talk offline on that. But I always just found that it helps structured, because I can tell you a lot of companies pride themselves on onboarding, but very few ever do it at an executive level, excuse me. And what I found it just calibrated us the first 90 days. And I always set the meetings up with my boss weekly. Touch points, 15 minutes. Here's what I've done. Here's what I'm doing. And it just aligns you. So after every 90 days, I always get the response, yep, you've hit all the marks. You're right on point. So it's just quick alignment.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Very good. That's all the questions, George, that are in the chat. Does anybody else have anything that wasn't addressed or would like to ask George?
All I ask is, if you do buy the book, just give me a reference or a review on Amazon. It does help. Ironically enough, I had a guy call me out of the blue in Texas. It's really what I wrote the book for. 132 pages from start to finish. If I got laid off on Monday, I could read this book. I'm a slow reader, so 3 days. 3 days, and I could have a plan by the end of the week, and it would save me 3 to 5 months in this whole process. So a gentleman called me a couple weeks ago out of Texas. He says, George, you don't know me. He says, but I'm connected to somebody that made comment about your book, and I went out and bought it because I was out in 3 weeks. And he said, you're right. He goes, it would have took me 3 or 4 months to figure all this out. He says, this is just a great book. And to me, that's when it really resonated, that's the reason why I wrote the book, to help people just, clear out all this stuff, put a process in place, put a roadmap to be better successful in career transition.
Very good. Well, thank you, George. Really appreciate you spending your time with us today. And
We got 2 minutes.
Anybody else? 2 minutes. Any questions?
So Laura, you're going to send me that address of that person so I can send them the book.
Yeah, Andrea, send that off to me either by email or you can put it in through the chat. And then what I'm going to do is I will take over the screen share real quick just to give you an idea of what we have going for the next couple of weeks. Awesome, George. Thank you. That was today, the 24th. And then we start December next week. Josh, who's on our call with us today, he and Marvell Allen will be presenting on interview prep. Margaret, who is also here with us today, is going to be leading with Tiffany a session on Gallup strengths, and we'll put some requirements out for that because there are some requests for that before we join in. And then we're going to hit search strategy again. We hit it earlier in our series, but we have some new people and we'll have different perspective from Mark and Carlton. And then the 22nd, we're kind of looking at doing a panel discussion with breakout rooms from all of our presenters, anybody who's willing. So George, if you wanted to come back, you're welcome to join us. We're going to do something on that date. It's not fully formed yet, but it would allow anybody who missed some sessions to get some input from some of the people who presented on those. So that's really all I had, except everybody have a great Thanksgiving. Thank you for joining us today. And especially George, thank you for sharing your time with us and the book.
Yeah, thank you for asking.
Very good. Well, thank you, everybody.
Thanks. Happy Thanksgiving.